What the Minnesota Vikings have been doing simply cannot keep flying under the radar. This was one of the most underwhelming teams in football last season, but that's not going to be the case anymore. Minnesota is getting ready to win big, and they have the pieces in place to make a Super Bowl run this season. Now, let's start with the obvious here and the most important thing that Minnesota needed to do coming into the offseason, which was signing Justin Jefferson. What Jefferson has been doing on the Vikings in these past few years has been unlike anything we've ever seen. He's a guy that you watch on the field and just think to yourself, man, I hope he never leaves this team. In his first 4 seasons, Jefferson has become one of only 5 players to ever surpass 5,000 receiving yards. I'll take that one step further as well, because you might not be fully convinced yet. Jefferson's 5,899 career receiving yards is 400 yards more than the next closest receiver was in NFL history after their first 4 seasons in the NFL. And the dude missed multiple games throughout his career due to injury. This is just one of the many stats to display how incredible he's been, because it can't be understated. In fact, it still surprises me that he's been so dominant. What's scarier is that he's getting even better. In each year that he's played, he's improved his yards per game number. As a rookie, he was racking up 87.5 yards per game, bumping that up to 95.1 in his sophomore season, then 106.4 in his third year, and most recently 107.4 this past season. It's crazy to think that betting on him to pass 100 receiving yards in every single game is a great bet to make. Looking back, 2022 was the best we've seen from him. In just that one individual season, he was able to haul in 128 receptions for 1,809 receiving yards to win the Offensive Player of the Year award. He was also leading the league in receptions and yards. In 2023, he wasn't able to surpass those numbers, but he did have 68 catches for 1,074 yards. Want to know why these numbers are wild? Jefferson dealt with a hamstring injury most of the season and appeared in just 10 games, with some of those games watching him get extremely limited action. Yet somehow he broke 1,000 receiving yards and held his own against other premier receivers in the league. The guy is a cheat code, plain and simple. And if he's on the football field, the Vikings will remain a threat every single week. It really is just that easy. I, along with many others, knew that the Vikings had to get a contract extension signed with Jefferson. Their entire team changes when he's not out there with them. The negotiations were long and stressful, but a deal was finally done. He inked a 4-year, $140 million contract extension with $110 million guaranteed and an average yearly salary of $35 million. He's now making so much money that I'm out here hoping I can get a couple of dollars from him. This now makes him the highest paid non-quarterback player in the NFL, beating out both the Philadelphia Eagles receiver A.J. Brown and the San Francisco 49ers edge rusher Nick Bosa. While this is fantastic news for both the Vikings and Jefferson, it does screw over a couple of other teams who are hoping to sign their receivers, but I wouldn't imagine the Vikings care much about that. They got their guy, and if other teams can't get theirs, then Minnesota will be right there hoping to reel them in themselves. That aside, the money is excellent, and the numbers are phenomenal. But where does that leave the Vikings? After all, it's very hard to win a Super Bowl with just one player. Many have tried going that route, many have failed. From what I've seen, the Vikings did their best to retool and build for the foreseeable future. The most important piece of their offseason was drafting J.J. McCarthy in the first round. The team suffered a huge loss when veteran quarterback Kirk Cousins left to join the Atlanta Falcons in free agency, and as we all know, it's hard to win in this league without a steady hand throwing the football. Just look at all the worst teams in the league last year and tell me that the quarterback isn't the most important position on the field. McCarthy provides the offense with some potential for the future and a chance to make them more dynamic if he can truly reach his ceiling. He's also significantly younger and provides the team with a lot of flexibility financially. In the past, we've seen teams take advantage of their quarterbacks being on rookie contracts and go all in to win now. The Cincinnati Bengals made a Super Bowl with Joe Burrow, and the Houston Texans have just recently geared up to make a similar run with CJ Stroud. And we've all seen what the Kansas City Chiefs did early in Patrick Mahomes' career. McCarthy has the potential to put the Vikings on that exact same path, even if he doesn't end up being a generational talent like Mahomes. If those other teams could pull it off when everybody counted them out, why can't the Vikings do it? Well, everyone is going to point at McCarthy anyway and assume that he doesn't have what it takes to get the job done. We've all heard the talk around the NFL world that McCarthy was only good at Michigan because he didn't have to throw the ball much. That argument is based entirely on the eye test. So what do his college numbers tell us? The stats don't lie. He's extremely careful with the football and doesn't often make mistakes. He's thrown 44 touchdowns in the past 2 years at Michigan, and in that same period, he's thrown just 9 interceptions. He completed 65% of his passes in 2022 and improved that number to 72.3% in 2023. He seems to always know where he's placing the football and remains calm under pressure. Those are absolutely traits that I want my franchise quarterback to have. Based on what we've heard out of the Vikings camp during OTAs, it appears that McCarthy has been crushing it. Every single rumor, leak, or report that has come out of the Vikings camp since the draft has been talking about how great McCarthy has been on the field. He's developing quickly in this offense and picking everything up about as well as anyone could have hoped. It's small stories like this about McCarthy that just get you unbelievably excited as a fan. Now that you've heard enough about the star of the show in Justin Jefferson and their franchise quarterback in McCarthy, let's dive into the meat of the roster because this team is very underrated. Starting with the offensive line, they are bringing back essentially the same group from 2023. This is a pretty solid offensive line that can keep up with most NFL defenses. When I looked into some numbers, Pro Football Focus had the Vikings offensive line as the 3rd best pass blocking team in the league last season. They were also the 10th best run blocking team. It doesn't matter what quarterback you have under center, if they have an offensive line that can protect them like this, good things will usually follow. When you put a group like this alongside their other offensive weapons, it could be getting pretty scary over there. They have Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson, and were able to somehow snag Aaron Jones in free agency. When you line up across from this offense, you have to constantly worry about Jefferson, Addison, and Hawkinson, and the ground game will always be a threat with Jones's blazing speed. It gives me a headache just thinking about how to slow them down. It's the defense that causes more concern at first glance. However, looking deeper, they're not as bad as they might appear. Last season, Pro Football Focus had the Vikings ranked 31st in pass rushing as a unit. This seems far worse in 2024, considering that they lost their best pass rusher, Danielle Hunter, to free agency. So, how do they stack up now on that front? Well, they added Jonathan Greenard in free agency alongside Andrew Van Ginkel. 2 additions that can immediately impact their pass rush to start the season. Can both of them match the production lost by Hunter? I certainly think so, especially because they drafted Dallas Turner in the first round as well. The edge rushing rotation should be far deeper and more impactful. One thing that just really gets me excited about this Vikings team is that they hurt themselves way more than any other team hurt them. You might be wondering what I mean by that, so let's break it down. Kirk Cousins started the first 8 games, and the team was 4-4 in that span. This isn't bad at all, but it was still pretty underwhelming given that they were a playoff team the season before. When Cousins went down with that brutal injury, they had to go through multiple quarterbacks the rest of the way, which included Joshua Dobbs and Nick Mullins. Now look, I love the Joshua Dobbs story last season, but we have to be honest here. He simply wasn't that good. However, despite lacking the most integral position on the field and on the defensive end with their 31st ranked pass rush, the team ended the year 7-10. 3 of their 6 losses down the stretch of the season were by a combined 6 points. 2 of the other losses were both against a Detroit Lions team that made the NFC Championship game, and the other was a blowout defeat at the hands of a Green Bay Packers team that advanced into the divisional round of the playoffs. If the ball bounces their way a couple of times, they easily end the season 10-7 and push toward a playoff spot. This team is a lot closer to being Super Bowl contenders than many people realize. Minnesota lacked depth and consistency defensively. They lacked a solid presence at quarterback down the stretch. TJ Hawkinson battled injuries, and they didn't have a true number one at running back due to the departure of Dalvin Cook, yet they were competitive in every game that they played. I'm sorry, but if you give other teams these types of problems, they will likely finish with around 3 wins and battle for the top pick in the draft. Instead, the Vikings were always competitive and had a few bad bounces from a playoff spot. Even if the defense remains the same next year, their offense alone can help them win more games and make a playoff run. I mentioned earlier that McCarthy didn't turn the ball over much in college. Well, turnovers were what killed the Vikings last year after Cousins went down. Dobbs threw 5 interceptions in 5 games, and Mullins threw 8 interceptions in 5 games. Jaren Hall appeared in only a few drives, and he threw an interception as well. Assuming McCarthy can keep the turnovers to a minimum all season, and assuming Aaron Jones stays healthy enough to provide some speed in the backfield, there's no telling what Minnesota can achieve offensively. Overall, I wouldn't be casting doubts on the Minnesota Vikings heading into 2024, because this team is being built to win games immediately. With that being said, I'd like to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see all of you in the next video.